Yeah, g'day everyone, and welcome back to the TryPod live with Winnie and Clarkey. As of that click, we are now live everywhere, all over social media. A little bit of a delay there. Listen, guys, we've got our round 17 NRL preview here, and we're also going to go through best bets there. But of course, we need to start with our State of Origin recap. So for that reason, Winnie, best bets, we will break protocol. They will be not within the first 5 minutes today because we've just got to speak about that game, mate. What a crazy game of footy. How'd you see it?
Well, where I want to start is yourself, mate, because you cop a lot. I feel like you sometimes cop strays that are aimed at me. They hit you because I've had such a bad year. But we've done the pod together for 2 years, so we've previewed 5 origins, and you have picked the winner in all 5 of them. So I know one of the criticisms of you was, well, Clark, he's always going to say Titans or he's always going to say Queensland. It's meaningless. You picked New South Wales in Game 3 last year. You picked New South Wales in Game 2 this year as well. And on top of that, you said you were going to try your hand at kind of tracking your punting record and giving official plays. And we had Clarkey's Collect same game multi hits at $10 odds as well. So people will jump in the comments, even if you lose at $1.90 play. Believe me, they'll let me know. Not a losing bet goes by without someone letting me know. But they won't come back and tell you, well done or thank you after a $10 winner. But it is worth celebrating those. We had man of the match too, where I gave out Mitch Moses, and man of the series is a real chance there. We'll talk more about that later. My same gamer only went 2 of 3. That 34 points by the Blues first half did me over there. But the best bet did win with the Blues having more possession. I could have just gone Blues for the game, couldn't I? But they both won probably just as easily with nearly 70% possession to the Blues first half. Now, 9 of the last 11 games, the Blues have had more possession than Queensland, even though they have a losing record over that time span.
Yeah, man, for me, I mean, I go straight to Clarkey's Collect. Now, I did say on the preview pod, I got 0 from 3 from my first multi on the NRL last round. But I said, you guys know I love a fight. I'm going to dive in and give it my best shot again. We went Blues head-to-head. That cashes. And the same game multi as well with Dylan Edwards. Hamaso, which was kind of lucky because he came back on for us to score that try. Latrell scoring, not Reece Walsh. As we did kind of say, if you are feeling cheeky, throw Walsh in as well to get up to $81 odds. That would have just missed. So that was an awesome start there, mate. But onto the game. I mean, we're still less than 24 hours removed, and I'm still can't really make sense of what I've seen. I think that's the most dominant opening half in State of Origin I can ever remember, certainly from my time since I started watching. And I went back to our previous show and I had a listen and a look back at my notes. And in there, I did say I expect the Blues to win here because they'll be the slightly more desperate side. Now, my definition of slight is not 34-0 at halftime. So I did not see this coming at all. I thought 1-12 would have been the winning margin for the Blues. On reflection, though, Winnie, this kind of hit me at halftime when I was doing some content. Madge did the exact same thing with the Kiwis last year. They lost to the Kangaroos by 14 points or something. One game later, they won 30-0 to actually win the game that mattered more. In the context of the series, the same thing has happened. Madge has repeated that history there. And I got to full time and I started to think, well, we're at Suncorp, so definitely going to be the Maroons. Don't have to put too much thought to it. I'll be going the Maroons. But then I started to, deep dive a little bit more. And I thought, well, really, if Joseph Suaalii doesn't get sent off, I think the Blues, all things considered, have actually been the more dominant side this Origin series so far. Would you agree with that?
It's a fair way to look at it. That was the game where we got to see 13 on 13 and it wasn't close. Game 1 wasn't close either, but New South Wales has the big excuse, has the asterisk. It got me thinking maybe I was right with Blues plus 2.5 in the first game. Because look how much better they were in the second game at a neutral venue as opposed to at home. But we all agreed that the Blues team was better in game 2 and Queensland was just off last night, and that can happen. So I'm not certain, but you have to figure out who the better team is. The market is telling us the Blues are the better team, where it's essentially pick them for game 3, and we all understand the cauldron of Suncorp is a massive advantage, and nevertheless, the line is at 1.5 at the most. I would say the game last night played out the way that we outlined for New South Wales in attack. The methodical and the power game and just wanting to generate opportunities off quick play the balls and off fatigue of tired defenders. But the thing is, it was just total one-way traffic. It was New South Wales coming out, punching Queensland in the mouth early and never taken that backward step when Queensland could never get a foothold in the game. And it's repeat sets. It's a penalty late in the count or 6 agains. There was about 15 tackles in a row on the Maroons line before they finally break through a gem of a pass, Moses to Martin. One gripe I have as a Queensland, and not just for Queensland last night, but in general, I hate it when teams go long dropouts. I mean, Queensland was under the pump, no ball, and they went long. That's exactly what New South Wales wanted, surely, get a run up and charge at them again. That happened a couple of times where the Blues forced dropouts. Queensland didn't go short and paid the ultimate price. Tries that were converted into 6-pointers thanks to the sharp shooting of Lomax, who had a whale of a game as well. And I didn't know if he was getting the kicking duties. They said he had to get his knee drained, but he was one of the Blues' best on ground, and there were many to choose from. Maroons might have had one half break in the first half, but never arrested the momentum to really counterpunch. They wouldn't have been panicking down 2 tries, even 3, but by the time you're like, wait, it's 22-0 or 28-0, it was game over. And it was just that explosivity of these outside backs like Lomax, To'o on the other wing, like Latrell. I mean, yeah, you said the most dominant you've seen. It was, by the record books too, 34-0, game over, and the biggest lead in 45 years of Origin history at halftime.
I'll actually circle out one moment where I think the Maroons well and truly lost this game. And of course, you can circle out hundreds from that game. It's all subjective. But I actually thought it was Zach Lomax's try in the 39th minute. I think if the Maroons go into halftime 28-0 down, certainly there's no confidence there. But there would have been a little bit of belief, particularly if they did get that score back to, I think they ended up scoring 18 in the end it was. I think knowing that they were within 2 converted tries, they would have played a lot different in that second half. But I'm not sure what happened. I just think from a punting perspective, what I want to do is come out of this one and search for some potential causes, isolating those, and then making a decision on if we think the Blues can replicate that in the decider, noting it will be at Suncorp, it will get a step harder again. And the only positive as a Maroons fan I can take from this is technically we do have the momentum in the series because we won the second half. And that's completely nitpicking. And you know what I mean? It's a very, very nitpicking way to look at it. But I felt like the Blues had a real opportunity here up 34-0 at halftime to do what the Titans did against the Warriors and just say, stuff you. We are going to run all over you for 80 minutes and completely destroy your confidence. Instead, now I get the feeling the Maroons will kind of really isolate that first 40 minutes, see that I believe it was the share of possession that absolutely cost them. And in game 3, we've been saying this all series, when are we going to get that typical low-scoring Origin game? We haven't got it yet. Early thoughts for game 3, I think that could be it, because I think the Maroons are going to hit the Blues with their own medicine. Safe, consistent footy, a lot of focus on the first contact in defense, and ensuring that that completion rate is well up from where it was, and the possession rate therefore as well. But
mate, I definitely think we look forward to this game so much. There's so much ability on both sides, and it's all the best players. We think we're going to get the greatest match, and we've had 2 total mismatches. We've had 2 blowouts, but it does kind of set up for game 3 being the one that's on a knife edge. And that's where you've got to get your game plan right. You've got to get your game right, and you got to get your selections right too. Because in these previous games, you could say, like, you and I were both right. The Blues should have picked Latrell in game 1. But would they have won anyway? Well, that's, I suppose, a different rabbit hole, because if he was picked ahead of Swaliti, maybe the send-off doesn't happen. But like you can second guess any decision, like should Queensland have picked Fafita for game 2? But none of them would have changed the result because they were so beyond doubt. But what these teams do for game 3, and clearly the Blues they'll probably stick to the exact lineup if it's available, but there's a couple of rounds of footy to get in ahead of that. I don't buy into getting any motivation or momentum out of the second half, because the game is that far gone. All Queensland did as a positive was avoided total annihilation and a record score, which, that is positive that they didn't get totally embarrassed. The scoreline, in fact, wasn't even as bad as game 1. Talking back about the highlights of the night, clearly Mitch Moses. Tipping him man of the match is nice. 4 assists. Didn't kick goals like I thought, but still in-game kicking was so potent. And just had a noose around Queensland's necks all night. Not to mention the defensive plays when Queensland potentially threatened. It was Moses twice jamming Dearden and actually forcing turned over ball. You got to talk about my Wally Lewis tip, which I was obviously laughed at by a lot of people for tipping Moses 200 to 1, lurking there, not picked and not fit before game one. That has a chance to be the highest odds winner I've ever tipped in 10 years of the pod. I was thinking back in 2016, I did tip a multi at 600 to 1, but we had one leg pushed. 2017, the famous 100 to 1 that I'm sure people still remember. 2018, we had 120 to 1 win, but 200 to 1, that is saying something because you guys know me. I really don't tip a lot of these ultra long shots. And look, it's still got work to do. Although I asked Tristan to talk about that, but clearly, Moses is well in single figure odds to be the player of the series, and would have, swept the boats last night. But others, Angus Crichton, I've seen in the comments, was also one of the best on ground for sure. Payne Haas, you're just used to him doing it, but at Origin level, one of his better games. Murray didn't look like a guy who barely played any footy for 2 months. Edwards, what a debut. I mentioned Lomax. With getting a double, kicking all those goals, I was wondering, could a winger get man of the match for a little while there? And Latrell, too, the impact he had. Anyone else kind of stood out for you for the Blues?
Payne Haas, 31 tackles, 0 missed, had offloads in the middle, 2 tackle breaks, and I think up around the 170-ish meters, Michael. That was his best game in a Blues jersey. And a crazy stat on Mitchell Moses' performance from Random Stats Guy. Mitch Moses had more try assists in that game than any player has had in an entire series since 2018. So in one game, he's done what no player's done in 6 years in 3.
And Ryan asked, what odds would Moses be to win the Wally right now? So I figure New South Wales are basically 50-50 to win game 3, according to the market. So then you say, if the Blues win the series, I think Moses is about 50-50 to get it, if not better. So I think he's about a true 1 in 4 chance because he's already been man of the match. He doesn't need to be man of the match again. The only way somebody else can overtake him in the votes, because I really don't think any Blues players polled in game 1, would be Moses would have to be totally out of the top 3 and somebody else would have to be a unanimous man of the match. So he's probably even a better than 50-50 at this point, just because the halfback's always going to have fingerprints over a win. And the narrative is totally there about, I've heard everyone talking about, look, if the Blues win game 3, it's Moses' jersey, Nathan Hu. Like, people are talking about him like he's the greatest player on the planet. I feel like nobody really spoke about Moses like this, even 24 hours ago, but he's turned it on. On the Queensland side of things, Walsh got to play. He tried his best, but the thing is, New South Wales had so much focus, but also so much energy. They were feeding off all their results they were getting in attack, but they also weren't doing any work in defence. So when Queensland had the ball, there were no openings for anyone to exploit. So it's a very tough night at the office. Like Walsh probing, darting, but what could he do? I will talk about, shortcomings of Queensland, though. Like, people love Dearden, love his toughness. Like, he belongs in the Origin arena. But right now, Tom Dearden's not a superstar. And at Origin level, you need superstars. You look at Queensland winning a decider a couple of years ago, like Caleb Ponga really was, I think he was man of the match on that night. Clearly Walsh is there, Harry Grant, like even I would say DCE, not the highlight players, but he is his superstar for his ability to control the game. And for the Blues, they've got Mitch Moses there. Edwards is probably in that category as well. Obviously, Crichton, Latrell Mitchell. So again, I would have picked Mam going into this series. I don't think Billy will change it, but it's food for thought when you need to find points against the Blues. Are there enough game breakers? Are there enough stars on this Queensland team? I think they must pick Fafita in game 3. I found myself thinking, would Cobbo have done better under the high ball than Taulagi? I know he has the injury, but is he just a better raw player? That I know he's playing centre this year, but could he play on the wing? Is he better than Taulagi? You need to make sure you get these decisions right. And I even wonder if Harry Grant should start in game 3 if you just need more minutes out of him and inject Hunt in different ways or have them both on the field. Speaking of Cobbo too, we had an outside back injured for the 6th time under 8 matches under Billy Slater, and they didn't have an outside back on the bench this time. So Capewell went there, so that didn't work. I've got one or two changes I will discuss for the Blues, but how about back to you? What would you be thinking as a Queenslander needs to change ahead of Game 3, personnel-wise?
Personnel-wise, I haven't really singled anything out yet. I'm always cautious of going in for changes in the
Not
first 48 hours. Exactly, because I do overreact. I'm an emotional guy with my footy, and if anything, I'm too passionate about the Maroons and the Titans there. So I haven't put too much thought to it. One thing I do have to say though is this sucks because I never want to say anything too negative about anyone that pulls on the Queensland jersey, but I just thought Kurt Capewell, that wasn't good enough of a performance. I think he had 8 tackles and something like 44 meters. And I'm a proud Titans man. I just know Dave would have added a bit more from the bench than that. He would have brought a bit more spark. Certainly nothing that would have changed the game. I'm not putting anything that crazy out there, but I thought Dave would have added a lot more. And I would also consider at this stage Winnie, Selwyn Cobbo actually at centre instead of Valentine Holmes. I know you lose a goal kicker there, so I'm not sold on it just yet. But Cobbo's just that bigger body, right, where you kind of saw Holmes hesitate on the trail because there was the threat of Dylan Edwards out the back, where he's not fully committed. And I feel like Cobbo could do the same, not be fully committed to the trail and still be watching other options. But because he's a bigger body, if he's not making that tackle on the trail, I think at least he stops his momentum for someone else to wrap it up. Whereas Holmes, oh my God, he got ragdolled by Crichton and Latrell a lot of last night. I saw a lot of missed tackles there. So a few ideas rolling through my head, mate. The only thing I actually am concrete on what I think, and this goes back to punting, Game 3 for, as far as the Wally Lewis medal is concerned, I'm probably looking only at Mitchell Moses and DCE because I just think if either state's to win, the halfback's going to be very important, right? And they've both already polled max points with MVPs respectively in games 1 or 2. Do you have any odds available there, or do you know anything about the odds?
No, I haven't seen any bookies. I haven't seen any bookies put it up yet.
Well, let's wait and see there, because there could be a bit of value there if we could get something around that. But mate, have we talked long enough for Origin? Any final thoughts from yourself?
I guess just like talk about overreacting. People out there, you're guilty. If you're guilty, admit it at least to yourself. Who said series was over after Game 1? I guarantee you there were Blues fans saying, no way we can win this series. Like, we didn't win it. We couldn't even win in Sydney. There were so many even Blues fans. And there were Queensland fans too saying series is over. Like, that was the one game you had a chance in Sydney. And like, there's no chance you're beating us in Suncorp. And then, we got a 50-50 chance to wrap it up in Melbourne. But how do you feel now, everybody? Like, surely after what we saw, there's a lot of people that actually believe the Blues will go and get the job done, unlike 2021. And no, was it 2020? Sorry, 2020 and 2022, where there were deciders in Queensland, and Queensland did win both of those. So it's been the even years, the deciders in Queensland. But we won't talk too much again about our predictions for 2024. But I do have to say, I do have big vibes of 2 years ago, where Queensland won in Sydney, then the Blues won the neutral venue. It was actually Perth. It was Nathan Cleary who dominated. I had tipped Cleary at $9 Wally Lewis medal. He was into like $1.50 because remember Munster got scratched from the decider with COVID. But as we know, Queensland pulled it off, and we can move into. I think we can move into round 17 now. And my best bets, but my final thing I'll say, Clarkey, is we're still Queenslanders,
mate. And this is what I guess I will finish with this, Winnie, because I just want to put this out there on our platform as well. How I said the Maroons have some momentum heading into the Game 3. When you look at it logically and objectively, no, they got blown off the park in this game. But Billy Slater is just that little bit delusional in the right way. And that is not an insult. He is delusional in the right way, where he will trick his players to believe that and have them up for it. Guys, forget about the first half. Second half, I don't know. I just have a feeling he'll get him up for that next this decider at Suncorp.
Oh, no doubt he will.
And just twist it a little bit there, mate. But we're almost at the 20-minute mark, mate. That's our Origin Game 2 recap, guys. Let's move into NRL round 17. Winnie, what have you got for us in the way of best bets this round?
I am just lining it up because I was going to back it in front of everybody's eyes, because equal best price on the board for my first best bet of round 17 is the Canterbury Bulldogs under 20.5. So team total under 20.5 at $1.85. It's on Better and it is on Dabble. Now, Crichton, who is a superstar, another one of the Blues' best last night, he's no certainty to back up, but if he was to be withdrawn from this side, like that takes away some of the prowess of the Dogs' attack. I just feel like Cronulla coming in full strength, coming in off a bye, and dirty about some of their recent performances, including most recently where they found themselves down 22-0 to the Dolphins and couldn't quite climb out of that. They're going to come in with a gritty final style performance and limit the Bulldogs' opportunities. And the thing about the Dogs is even when they're at their best, they are restricting the opponent and it can be a low-scoring game. But the Dogs could be successful, could cover, could even win with 20 or less points. But I do believe the Sharks cover this line. So I leaned the -5.5, but I liked the team total, Bulldogs team total, under 20.5. That is tomorrow night, so Friday night. On Saturday, I am going the Melbourne Storm. My best bet is going to be win the first half and win the second half. So it's known as win both halves. I mean, but the price is $1.96 on Better. The trick is you actually just play it as the same game multi. So you pick Storm win first half, Storm win second half, and it pays $1.96. But you'll also find that market, Ladbrokes, Toppy, it's just more like around $1.85. So that's why I'm always doing my best finding value for you guys. And for me, I just can't really see how the Raiders keep it close. I don't want to fade the Raiders and overreact to the fact that they let me down on Sunday. Arvo was so poor against the Tigers, so sloppy first half and couldn't find their way back into the game till it was far too late. But it's a mismatch to me. And I believe that the Storm also was sloppy against the Finns and didn't put away the Dolphins. And we'll get a more highly focused Melbourne team that's closer to full strength now. Pappy has returned. I want to say Melbourne's home. You can confirm that for me, Clarkey.
Yeah,
but that's right. So it's so hard to beat there. And the line's getting out to 15.5. I probably prefer, as long as Melbourne's kind of leading by 1-14, then you've kind of end up with a better line than what the line opens for the game. But if Melbourne's up by more than 16 or more at halftime, you're not going to feel bad about needing Melbourne to win the second half too, because at that point, Canberra may already just about be put away. And finally, my third best bet for the round is just Roosters -12.5 at $1.91 on 365, which is the same thing as 13 plus, which is $1.88, Ladbrokes and Neds. I just feel like, yes, the Tigers have won 2 in a row now. The Titans and the Raiders were well below their best and dropped a lot of ball in those games. I hate to sound like I'm just taking away from the Tigers. And you've got to understand that not only are my best bets going badly this year, but I was against the Tigers in both those games. So you might accuse me of still being salty, but I still just believe there's a massive gulf in class between this Roosters side that has their eyes firmly set on top 4 and cannot muck around and lose a game like this, where last year they did drop a couple as double-digit favourites around the same point in the year. So the fact that the Tigers have won 2 in a row means you're playing like the second bottom side of the ladder, but you won't be complacent whatsoever. And I just think that the Roosters will, should run rings around West, honestly, on Sunday afternoon.
Love those best bets, mate. My best bet for this week in Clarkey's Collect is Roosters -11.5 and Daniel Tupou as an anytime try scorer play at $2.45. Not sure the exact figures on Clarkey's Collect, but certainly up after a successful night last night in the Origin. And that game is
nearly 9 units already.
Nice. We're playing with the house money.
Lost last week, but so far so good.
Yes, and I'll get to the exact reasons when we get to that game, which is last, so you'll have to wait a little bit, unfortunately. But Winnie loves it as well, so that's a good sign that we're both aligned there. Alrighty, mate, we will move to it game by game in just 1 second. But before we do, let's take a chance to hear from the CEO of Top Sport with some exclusive market insights and his Origin Game 2 reaction. Please welcome Mr.
G'day everyone, Tristan Merlehan here from Top Sport. And geez, I just realised I'm wearing blue, which typifies what happened last night. New South Wales way too good in a very dominant first half performance. Queensland fought back a little bit in the second half, but obviously the horse had bolted at that point. So it sets up for an exciting decider where we have opened up the market as Queensland's slight favourites, $1.85, $1.95. New South Wales, it hasn't moved from that opening quote. We saw a massive plunge for New South Wales, as I touched on in this video earlier in the week, where New South Wales actually got into $1.70 odd when the game started. So it was a massive go. It'll be interesting now, will there be another move towards New South Wales like there has been in the first couple of games, or the decider at Queensland, will that help? Queensland will obviously help them, of course, but where will this game jump? It's going to be an interesting one. We have Queensland slight favourites. Obviously, you'd expect a couple of team changes. In the Queensland side of things, I'd imagine New South Wales will stay unchanged unless, of course, there's injuries, which unfortunately, touch wood, we know there have been over the last while. Just looking at the round ahead, it's very tricky to price this round. There hasn't been too many massive moves. We're just still waiting for absolute confirmation on all the on all the players, if they are or aren't backing up. But the Roosters game, that's probably been the biggest move, 15.5 into 13.5, but we have laid the chooks at the minus. So one of the topical questions that a few people have asked me is where I think the Wally Lewis medal will be situated, and just bringing that up now. Obviously, on the back of Mitch Moses' massive game last night, he was dominant, very impressive, and we actually laid him at 100 to 1. We had him a little bit shorter than the market. We still laid him at 100s and then 80s, and then also at $26 before the game on the weekend, where he's last night, should I say, into $21. So he obviously got that man of the match. Where he'll be when the market, if the market reopens, I'm not sure if the Wally Lewis opens up pre the last game, but I'd say he'll be around the $7 to $8 mark for the man of the match award. Obviously, you won't need that to win the Wally Lewis. You wouldn't imagine. So you'd imagine it'd be a little bit shorter than that. Just to put into perspective, Daly Cherry Evans was $3.60 after winning man of the match in that first game. So I'd probably think he's going to be somewhere in between those two prices. So anyone who got on the big odds will be very excited about the prospects of that. So I hope you're back to winner if you did over the weekend, and hopefully from my end, the Queenslanders bounce back a bit for Game 3. See you guys. Gamble responsibly, of course.
Great stuff there from Tristan. As always, thank you very much for that exclusive market insight. Winnie has also typed the best bets, so they are on screen for us now. And with that, we'll move into our game-by-game preview. Game 1's at Friday, 8 p.m. at Accor Stadium, and the Bulldogs host the Sharkies, with the line is set at -4.5 against the Sharks, who have one change. Tuku Tapahu comes in for Hamlin Welle, and for the Bulldogs, Blake Taaffe is in, Tracy is out, Cherry comes back in, Hutchinson's out, and at this stage, Crichton is named to back up, but we'll have to wait and see. Alrighty, Winnie, these sides met earlier this year in round 2, and the Sharks won that one 25 points to 6. Can you see a world where the Bulldogs get revenge here, or are you all with the Sharkies?
There's always a world where it can happen, but mate, again, I'm going to break protocol because I've just realised I didn't upload our graphics, and I've got them handy. Why don't I throw it back to you to share how you see this one, and then I wrap around. People already know I do like Cronulla in the matchup. My best bet, Dogs under 20.5.
Perfect, mate. Let me take it away. Look, I just think for this one, guys, the Sharks have really mixed the form in their last 5 games. You know, they had a loss to the Dolphins there, where I think they shown enough. I wasn't disappointed with their loss. And they also had a loss to the Eels, who were last place at the time, and a 42-0 loss to the Panthers in that bunch. Now they're coming off the bye. So I do think they're the fresher side, and they probably did need that chance to freshen up, because their form at the start of the year to what we've seen in their last 5, it's not the same Sharky side as far as I'm concerned. Now, across this season so far, we have all noted the Bulldogs as a defensive side, and rightfully so. But when you crunch the numbers there, the Sharks are actually only conceding an average of 3 more points per game. So less than a try there. And they are averaging more than 4 points scored. So it does actually fall in their favor there when you break it down statistically. I just think because these sides are so similar in that regard, and as far as it's concerned, I look to their early encounter in round 2 there, and that does lead me to the Sharks. Now, additional to that, I actually think the Bulldogs lose a huge element of their backline and their overall attack without Connor Tracy. I think Blake Taafe's going to give you consistent meters and a stronger running game. But Connor Tracy's ball playing out the back, it was only a few weeks ago we had 3 or 4 try assists there and had an absolute blinder. I think it was against the Eels on the King's birthday. Now, the Sharks have also averaged 35 points against the Bulldogs in their last 3 times they've played. And I don't think the Doggies have 35 points in them. So I am going to tip the Sharks here to break the 5-game winning streak at Accor Stadium that the Bulldogs have built. And that will be the Bulldogs' first home loss this year. So for my tip, I'm going Sharkies -3.5 in this one. How do you see it, Winnie?
So kind of got the Doggies off a loss, but a hard-fought loss at the hands of the Roosters in a physical game in the rain at Gosford, while the Sharkies got that bye that you discussed there being much needed. Tracy out, though. Taff is a good replacement. I got pretty solid back rowers in the reserves on both sides. I think Preston, a chance to return for the Dogs. Equally, Teague Wilton could bolster this Sharks side.
He will return winning.
There's the fortress for the Doggies, right, being unbeaten at home. However, it's a Sydney game. I still can't give like a great amount of credence to that statistic. And I got a fresh Cronulla side that, was top of the ladder when the Origin series started and is still equal first. But with no Origin players, I almost feel that gives this team an edge. I mentioned before, if Crichton's out, you beauty. Even if he's in, he's also such a good defensive player. And again, I don't mind if this is a total arm wrestle. I'm not even laying the points here. I'm just playing towards unders and towards the Doggies under.
Yeah, mate, I like that one a lot there. Ryan says, I'm not as confident in the Sharks, but I do like the under 47.5, so I don't mind the best bet. And Colt says the Dogs
again, if you're not as confident, you can just play the whole game under 47.5. Like, I'm only isolating the Bulldogs because I do respect what the Sharks might do coming out of this bye. And after everyone is applauding Moses, Nico Hines will remind people what he's still definitely able to do at NRL level.
Absolutely. And Colt says that the Dogs need to use kick-out more, as you alluded to there as well. Teague Wilton might return. Craig Fitzgibbon actually let slip today at the media by accident. He said, Teague Wilton's great. He does this for us. He does that. And I'm excited to have him back this week. So a slip of the tongue there. Teague Wilton seemingly back for the Sharkies as well. And don't forget, Friday Night Footy also means an exclusive Better Same Game multi crafted by Winnie himself. Better also provides further NRL talk and tips in the Fox Sports Lab, which you can check out on their YouTube channel each Wednesday. And always importantly, think, is this a bet you really want to place? For free and confidential advice, call the number or visit the way in the show description. Alrighty, game 2 winning. I can already see a bunch of Warriors fans over there on my Instagram screen saying up the Wars. Saturday, 3 p.m., Go Media Stadium. Warriors host the Broncos. Line is set at -2.5 against the Broncos. Now, their Origin players are named in reserve, so they can play. We'll have to wait and see. Jesse,
let me interrupt you because an hour ago, Peter Bedell reported that the 3 Origin reps, Haas, Carrigan, Walsh, who were in the reserves, will not be playing. And
how has that
as a
affected
result,
that line?
This line has shifted, and now it's Pick'em or the Warriors are a slight favourite because it's not a total shock to anybody, but it was factored in that there was a chance those guys would play. And I actually noted it because this happened half an hour before the pod we started recording, and the lines didn't move instantly. There was still Warriors as underdogs in a couple of spots. So I noted like a conditional best bet. I said, if by the time we do best bets, I'm not trying to hear some news and then screenshot a market that's there for 3 seconds and call it a best bet. But if it was still available when I shared the bets, I would have said play the plus on New Zealand. However, I was checking before, and now they are into slight favourites. So we got a flipped favourite. So I'm happy to kind of leave it, and but just so people understand. So again, the graphic obviously is what it was a little earlier today when there was a chance those guys could play. Whereas for New Zealand, they do get back with Tennis Lesniak. We know Johnson being out, but Harris Tavita will move into the halves to partner Tamari Martin. Barnett was 18th man. Obviously, he's going to be fine. Capewell, I would suggest, should be playing off the bench. And this is the thing about New Zealand. They've well and truly hit their lowest point, the lowest of the low. And I talked about this with the Titans a week ago who faced New Zealand. And I've eviscerated them, as I don't need anybody to remind me, that teams are dangerous when they are absolutely humiliated, because these are professional athletes and they're looking for motivation to draw on, and these certain results where it's just an ultra low point of the season can actually have a galvanizing effect. And I'm not going to be shocked at all if the Warriors come out and replace the worst performance in years with one of their better ones at home at Mount Smart. And it's such a good opportunity. Like, Brisbane is a great team, came into the season second favourites, but there's no Adam Reynolds, who's one of their best 4 players, and the other 3 are all out as well. So you'd say Brisbane's best 4 players are missing for this trip. You know, there's a good reason to probably still back the Warriors. And it is ironic that the Warriors have gone from an underdog to a favourite, because I made this point on the recap that if you look at the last 11 Warriors games, the underdog has won outright, which has sometimes been the Warriors. So when they're an underdog, they win. When they're a favourite, they lose. When they've been a favourite for the last 11 weeks, they've lost every time. When they've been an underdog for the last 11 weeks, they've actually won every time, bar once they played the Roosters as an underdog and they did lose. So I'm not just talking about covering the line. I'm talking like outright victory as well. So when the Warriors were underdogs, you could have said, well, play them this week, because the underdog always wins New Zealand games. They win when you don't expect them. But now all the Broncos players, the best ones, are out. So now actually people will expect the Warriors to win this, I believe. So will they fail again? You know, I'll stay out of it. As you know, I don't have a best bet on this. And the thing is, I can't find a team I want to bet against. I actually don't want to bet against New Zealand in this spot, as I just explained. But I don't want to bet against Brisbane, who've lost 3 in a row and have had a bye. That's a desperate team as well. That's still reasonably capable even without the star power. So, you know, you could trend towards unders because of the desperation factor for both sides. A real pivotal moment in their seasons, potentially. If I have to pick a win, I would have to imagine New Zealand should be too good, but I don't need to be let down by the Wars again this week.
Yeah, so when I did my breakdown in this game, Winnie, I actually was factoring in those Broncos not playing. So that actually kind of suits my notes here. My first note was I did meet in New Zealand during the Origin period last year, and the Broncos did win there. And I remember saying on this show, I just can't see how they win without Carrigan and Haas in the middle. And I think there was someone else missing as well there, Walsh. But they found a way to do it. Now, I haven't liked what I've seen from the Broncos at all in their past 3 games. I thought they'd still be a top 4 side this year. I thought they could still be a top 4 side even without Adam Reynolds, in all honesty. But the small habits that made them so great last year and those 1%ers, they're kind of missing at the moment. Whereas the Warriors are coming off a 60-point loss. So the real question for me is, 1 week long enough for the Warriors to turn it around? And so I went through their season. I had a look at some other tough losses that they've had and how they rebounded. Round 2, they had a really tough loss to the Storm on the buzzer. They then rebounded for 3 wins in a row. Now, rounds 7 to 9, they were favourites or close enough against the Dragons, Titans, and Knights. They failed to respond in all of those games. They were clear favourites, and they failed to respond there. Then they went against the Roosters, where they were underdogs. They weren't expected to win. They got thumped pretty bad. Then we got the response. They beat the Panthers at Magic Round, and they then made that 3 in a row also. So I'm going to follow that trend. The 2 times this year the Warriors have snapped their winning streak is after the most embarrassing of the results, the 20-point loss there to the Roosters and the buzzer beater where they were set to win against the Storm. And I'm going to go a bold pick. The Warriors are going to win 3 in a row here. I'm going to follow that trend there. I actually think at this current stage of the Warriors season, Tamari Martin and Chanel Harris-Tavita work better as the halves pairing. Sean Johnson just hasn't looked 100% at all this year. He's always looked hindered by injury. And I think we saw as a halves pairing against the Dolphins what they're capable of, building pressure together and also coming up with important plays. I've got here a note saying my gut feeling is the Broncos Origin players don't back up at all. We now know that's not the case. So we do get a Warriors lineup that is much more likely to be 1 to 17 there. Both of these spots are in a bit of a bad spot defensively where they are leaking points. So as you said, I'm looking for a response mainly there. And for that reason, I'm going to go Warriors 1 to 12 for my tip. But I do love your one for the unders as well there. But I'll go Warriors 1 to 12. Alrighty, mate. Next game is Saturday, 5:30 p.m. We're at McDonald Jones Stadium at Newcastle, where the Knights host the Eels, and the line is set at -1.5 in the Knights' favour, who will debut Will Price at 6 alongside Jackson Hastings. Kai Pearce-Paul returns. For the Eels, Mitchell Moses is named to back up, and there was some suggestions today in the Daily Telegraph that he will back up. Mike Acevo is back. Matt Dury joins the bench as Kelma Tuolangi is out. And Matt Arthur, fresh off a debut for the Blues under-19s, makes his NRL debut. A lot on the line here for both sides. Winnie, Knights a 3-game losing streak. Eels a 2-game losing streak. Who do you believe snaps it and why?
Well, you've also got the fact that Para comes into the round bottom of the ladder, which is quite embarrassing for this team. They kind of thought their wooden spoon days were behind them, especially with the roster that they've got this year. We know that some of their best players have missed substantial time. We also know about this stat that's going around. Let us know in the comments. It's at least the last 4 weeks, whoever occupied bottom spot won, right?
I think, is it 3 or 4 weeks? So I've got in my notes here, Rabbitohs last beat Titans, Tigers last beat Titans, Titans last beat Warriors, Eels last, let's wait and see. But there might have been one week before that as well.
Might be 3 in a row then, at least. Yeah. There's the motivation for Para. But after these most recent couple of losses for Parramatta, the dog game is there to be. What more do you want? Everything that went wrong for Bulldogs on that Monday Arvo occasion, and then did actually put up a good fight, Parramatta, against the Roosters, and again had a second half lead, but the Roosters overcame them, and that was any semblance of keeping the season alive was extinguished at that point. So what are the Parramatta Eels playing for at this point? I suppose you can say to avoid a spoon, but this isn't must win to avoid the spoon. Playing for pride, I suppose, and on paper still a pretty solid team. But this Knights side, finished 5th last year, has the belief Ponga's still slated to return later this year. So they do kind of have this sense that whatever we can achieve without Ponga, then we actually can go to another level. So if we can get ourselves in the tournament, in the top 8, we can still possibly make things happen. So there's real belief in Newcastle. You always trust the Knights playing at home. The Knights are, apart from Ponga being out, closer to full strength themselves as well. So I feel like it is a bit of a coin toss because I do feel Para's the better team, but then that's that's counteracted by home advantage. And I actually could only play Newcastle because I think my motivation is questionable for the Eels, whereas it should be pretty clear for the Knights.
That's a good point there. Ryan says I'm the spoon taker. He's on the Eels there. I know to the Undertaker from the TryPod Facebook group. For me, I'm actually really excited for Matt Arthur's debut. I thought he had some really nice touches there in the under-19s for the Blues. And, of course, it is Brad Arthur's son. So a bit awkward. They sacked his dad earlier in the year, but they're all professionals, right? And hooker is really a position the Eels have lacked this year. I thought Joey Lussick would perform a lot better than what he has. And it's definitely the area of their spine that they're lacking the most. Mitchell Moses. I mean, could he be riding a higher point of his career? I don't think so. I think this is probably the highest point of his career. And I do expect him to carry that momentum back here for the Eels, just based on his comments in the newspaper today saying we shouldn't be in last place. We're embarrassed to be there. Seeing us sink there during the bye round has lit a fire in our bellies. So I think they're going to come out firing here. And even in their last 4 games, the Eels have scored at least 18 points. They've only won one of those games. But I just think if they can build on that and use that fire in their belly, we have a Knights side here that's conceding a higher average than that at 21. So I can see a world where the Eels get to 24, 28 points here. And I'll back them to defend that against the Knights side that, as I've touched on so many times this year, their spine is just not settled. We've got another halves combination coming in here. And I'm not sure if that's a good thing at this point of the season for them. Both sides are coming off the bye. I think that favors the Eels more because in that period, they did see themselves drop to last place on the ladder. Additionally to that, the Knights have not won at home since round 9 this year, and they have lost their last 6 games in a row to the Eels. But I will note as well, because as we always talk about winning, I can be a little bit manipulative with the stats. The Eels have also lost their last 6 games away as well. So I think that does even itself out statistically. My tip here, I can't give an official tip for the podcast, guys, because I'm going to go a little bit of an each way bet. If Mitchell Moses is definitely in, I'm with the Eels all the way. I wouldn't hesitate for a second. But if he doesn't play, then I probably do actually prefer the Knights. So because I go on a little bit of an each way there, no official tip for me on this one, guys, but that's where my head is at.
But thank you for bringing that up, because I do try and address like my major considerations in every game, and some of them, it's not that I have the answer, but I'm acknowledging the uncertainty. And clearly the Moses factor, it's like he should come in and they'd love him to take his Origin Arena form back to clubland and lift this Eels side, but we know that he wasn't kicking goals last night because he's got the foot issue.
Yeah.
Like in some ways, he's got a legacy-defining, career-defining game coming up in 3 weeks' time, in 19 days, or 20 days' time, which is a little bit more important. Probably even the Eels could understand that at this point. So you wouldn't play him through, an injury if there's any chance of aggravating it, making it worse. So that's another reason why I just wouldn't touch Parramatta now. But I think that's, good conditions you're stipulating there, that if you like Para, wait till you get the nod that like he's, Moses is good to go. And yeah, the price might crunch in a little bit, but you'll still find a price that's close to this current picker, and you'll have a lot more confidence going in.
If Mitchell Moses is ruled out, definitely, and we get that news leading up to the game, do you think that plus line for the Eels will climb as high as like a 4?
Oh, if he's officially out, yes, I do. I think
so
that
too.
yeah, I think it's trending towards he's in. But should he be out, I think that's right around, it would be somewhere from -3.5 to -4.5 Newcastle.
Yeah, I agree, mate. Just because we've kind of seen this year that Dylan Brown does struggle in that halfback role by himself. They do need the 2-half system. So watch and see for that game, guys. Our next game is at Saturday, 7:35 p.m. We're at Amy Park in Melbourne, where the Storm host the Raiders. The line is set at -14.5 against the Storm, and it continues to go against them from what you said earlier. Xavier Coates and Harry Grant are both named to back up. For the Raiders, Tom Sterling returns, Nick Kotrick is out, Albert Hopewadi in, and Jordan Martin makes his NRL debut via the interchange. These sides met at this exact venue winning last year in round 24, and the Storm held the Raiders tryless. It was a 48-2 demolition job. And I actually believe on the podcast I sat here and said, I reckon Raiders are going to go well here. It didn't go so well for me. How do you think this one plays out, though?
It could be closer to last year. I mean, the Raiders by that point in the season, actually the Raiders still made the finals, didn't they? But I'm trying to remember where they were at.
They made the finals with the worst for and against of all time.
Yeah, it wasn't a must win. But like the thing about Canberra, they did find that ability to win the majority of tight games last year. And look, they're not as good as their current position on the ladder this year either. Boy, they did disappoint me against West. But give a lot of credit, as I said in the recap, like West took the ball and the possession and territory that was handed to them by the Raiders, and then just throttled Canberra. But you go back to the completion rate, first half's like barely 60% for the Raiders. So you get kind of getting what you deserve first half. And at one point it was like a 36 point margin to the Tigers. But again, like what a way to start the game. An unmarked winger out the left, and you throw a short ball for an intercept that's a try the other way. So what I'm getting at is the Raiders were so like sloppy and shot themselves in the foot last week. And I don't really want to bet against that type of team because it wouldn't be that hard on that. It's just that I look at what the level of this Canberra side is compared to Melbourne. I know Munster's still out, but Jerome Hughes is in like amazing form. You feel that the Origin players should be right to back up for Melbourne by Sunday. You respect the home ability of this Storm side. I know that Canberra, of all teams, is not afraid of going into Melbourne, but that's almost extra motivation the Storm can draw on too, that Canberra has actually come into their house and taken some precious victories in recent history. I like the return of Pappenhausen last week, as I've seen in the comments, like he's in some doubt. But I mean, Farlongo's in the reserves. I'm not going to be mad either if it's Farlongo at fullback again. And I just have a Storm side that looks really complete to me. And yet, as I said at the beginning, didn't take every opportunity against the Finns and were a bit frustrated and didn't put the Finns away either when the lead got out to 12 or 14 points late. And then as a result, Melbourne was very nervous, made to feel very nervous late. So I like the fact that Melbourne will want to start strong as always, but should they have a lead, I think they'll want to put the foot on the throat. That's why my best bet was Melbourne to win both halves.
I do like that best bet, mate, and I've got to give full credit to the Storm. They're such a great footy side. Like, no Munster at the moment. Pappenhausen out for a large portion of this season. We've seen with other sides, when you take out two key players, and in this case, two superstars of the spine, absolutely they struggle in this NRL competition. But the fact that we're in round 17 and yet again, the Storm are first, it's just incredible. That being said, I didn't learn my lesson last time, Winnie. I didn't learn my lesson in the last 48 to thrashing there. I'm going to go the Raiders here, but hear me out. I'm not going to go head-to-head. I'm going to take them at a line, and this is why. Historically, the Raiders do actually do pretty well at Amy Park, despite it being a fortress for so many other teams. They've got a greater than 50-50 win rate there, going 8 from 14, and they are coming off 2 very bad losses now. Can Ricky Stewart get them up for a response? I actually think he can. Now, in terms of going to rivals' backyards and beating them, Melbourne is right up there with the Panthers at Bluebet. In this one, I actually think there is a chance Harry Grant will be rested due to that head cut he got there in Origin 2. That would mean Bronson Garlick likely into the hooker. That would mean Jerome Hughes would be potentially, if the rumours of Pappenhausen are correct, Jerome Hughes could be the only regular spine member there for them. And this is a spot for the Raiders where logically, my brain tells me there's no chance they can bounce back. The Storm are too good for a reason. But the last time I felt that way against the Raiders was against the Dolphins, and they won that game. It's these games for the Raiders where I thought at home they'd do well against the Cowboys, and I thought that they would absolutely give the Tigers a lesson that they haven't. So I'm going to lean into that trend. I don't expect them to win. It's a huge challenge to overcome here, but I do look at the Raiders forward pack. I think they can set the tone against the Storm, and if they do, I'm going to play them plus 15. Now, that's $1.87 on Top Sport, so it's above our best bet, our bottom line.
In fact, I just looked, a little bit of money's come from Melbourne, so you can get $15.5.95.
Wow, so even more. That's perfect, because that gives me 2 converted tries and a penalty goal buffer. I hope that's enough here, because I think this game can end up being a tough battle where the Raiders actually drag the Storm down to their level and it turns into a real, joust in the middle there. And I do like the Raiders forward pack if that happens. The Raiders have won 5 of their last 6 at Amy Park. The one they didn't win was a game where they didn't score a single point, so Ricky doesn't need to explain to them how important it is winning the middle. There's a big challenge that lies ahead, and because no one expects them to do it, I think the Raiders will do it. I think they'll keep it within plus 15 there. So that is my tip on this game. And I was
Cole
very
has commented similar there, the Ricky us versus them mentality. Like, he's great with backs up against the wall for sure. And that's part of the reason that they've been able to go and win. Like, that's an incredible stat. The 5 of the last 6 from Amy Park. The thing is, that actually doesn't make me feel uncomfortable about my best bet at all, because I feel like that stat can be plastered all over the Storm dressing room as well.
Yes.
That these guys think they come in and, own this joint, and we can prove otherwise. So it's definitely, I can understand it, the case for the Raiders. They are one of these inconsistent sides, like several others that you can name around, that seem to be from around the 7th, 8th to 13th on the ladder, where they're playing better in the weeks that you actually don't give them as much of a chance, like New Zealand, like North Queensland. So I can't fault you for suggesting that, on paper, the Raiders shouldn't really be able to hang with the Storm, but it's been one of those years where the results don't line up with conventional thinking all too often.
100%, mate. When there's an upset to be had, Ricky Stewart has his team right up for it. I was very close to naming that as my best bet for the week. Full transparency there. Alrighty, mate, let's move to the Sunday games. 2 p.m. We're at Nostrada Jubilee in Sydney, where the Dragons host the Dolphins. Line is set at -1.5 against the Dragons, who have named their Origin reps. Moses Sully is also named to return. For the Dolphins, Hammer and Karfusi are named. Tessie New is in. Jack Bostock is out. Pride on the line for the Dragons here, Winnie. Embarrassed 38-0 earlier this year in Redcliffe. Do you see a world where the Dragons get revenge here, or are you with the Finns?
I find this one really tough to pick. I should correct what you've said there, just in terms of well, not correct because you're right that Hammer was named, but I believe I read today he will be out, and that was as expected with the AC joint there. I'd be very surprised if Lomax plays though. You know,
he won't play
played
either.
through a lot, right? So that does kind of cancel out. Maybe I think that the Hammer's the superior player, but when you consider Lomax as the goal kicker too, it's a big loss to both sides, and the difference is as well that the Finns have a pretty capable replacement in Fuller, as we've said a couple of times. Don't mind backing the Finns when the Hammer is out. You'd expect that Hunt, Sua, Kaufusi, these guys should all back up because they didn't. Kaufusi, Hunt didn't play huge minutes, and these guys are all off the losing side. Probably just want to get their mind back to club footy. I thought I would play the Dolphins here. I think they're the superior side. And if I've got Lomax out and I've got the Finns, had they not lost Bostock so early and had to displace Herbie, could have easily upset Melbourne. However, it actually is a good spot for the Dragons. They got towed by the Dolphins earlier this year. They will remember that 30 or 40 point demolition in round 2. It's also, you got to remember the Dragons are off such a disappointing loss. Like nobody really thinks going into Manly on a Sunday arvo and losing by, I think they ended up losing by 8 points or whatever it was, maybe even 14 in the end.
It was more than that.
You know, is not a terrible loss, but it really was, given all the circumstances, given how down on troops Manly was and the control that the Dragons had in that game. And now St. George's had a bye, so they had the 2 weeks to stew on that one. St. George should come out and play as well as they can and as fierce as they can. And I'm very wary of this game. I think there's going to be a really tough one to get for the Finns. Where on paper, I believe most people will expect it because the Dolphins are equal fourth on the ladder. But I'm not confident enough. Even though you're catching a small line with the Dolphins, I think that's fair. I think the Saints should be a slight favourite at home.
I looked at both sides in their last contest, and they both had plenty of opportunities to win there for different circumstances and reasons. As you touched on, I was on the Dragons that day, and I was bitterly disappointed with their second half. The opportunity they had there against only 13 fit men. And for the Dolphins, they were really good against the Storm. They just came up short. And they do continue to improve on their away stats, which has been a pretty much big concern for me in a lot of my tips this year. They've won 5 of their last 7 away, and that is definitely improved on where they are. Now, originally, I thought this game was at Nostrada Jubilee, at Wynn Stadium in Wollongong. So I did jump the gun and get on the Dragons here, and then I later realized it was at Nostrada Jubilee, where they actually have conceded a whopping 122 points in their last 4 games, whereas they're undefeated at Wynn Stadium there in Wollongong. So I wish it was in Wollongong. But I think Lomax, look, next to no chance, I would say, given he had to have fluid drained out of his knee, and he was limping very bad on the broadcast after the game. I don't think he'll be there. And Hammer, AC joint, it's a pain issue. He's got bigger things around the corner with Origin 3, both extremely unlikely, if not all but confirmed out. And I think, as you said, that hurts both equally. Dolphins lose their best attack weapon, whereas the Dragons lose their goal kicker there. For me, because the Dragons are coming off the bye, that's why I'm going to play them. I think that's a big positive because I look at the Dolphins, and that's a side that has fought 80 minutes. You know, we often see sides go into Golden Point, Winnie, and be a little bit off the next week just from that extra 10 minutes of play. Well, this Dolphins side has fought tooth and nail for 160 minutes now in their last 2 games against a Storm side where they just came up short and a Sharks side where they only just came up with a victory, Sharks attacking their line at the very last second there. So for that reason, and the fact they've gone very hard toe-and-toe with fellow top 4 sides in their last 2, I'm leaning the Dragons. I think they'll be fresher. I expect Sua and Hunt to both back up. So my tip here is Dragons head-to-head, but full transparency, I'm extremely worried for that tip if either Sua or Hunt are ruled out. I really need them both to be there for that tip. Alrighty, Game 6, 4 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon at Bluebet Stadium. Panthers host Cowboys. Line is set at -10.5 against Penrith. Pretty similar to what it was earlier this year when they played in Townsville. They welcome back Cole and Kenny, and their Origin reps are named. We'll have to wait and see if any drop out. Same for the Cowboys, but their Origin reps are named in reserves, so they need to be transferred to the side. And Jordan McLean returns there as well. Tough game to pick for me, Winnie. We talk about uncertainty and who's backing up, who's not. Well, this is the game that's most affected. These sides have the most Origin reps. As it currently stands, who are you leaning with and why?
I totally agree. I find this one the hardest to judge for sure. And you're right. It was a great game last time they met too. The line was -10 Penrith. Mind you, Nathan Cleary was in back then.
Yeah.
So it was basically a full strength Panthers side that I was leaning to take the Cowboys because it was a good spot for them. And next thing it's 20-0 Penrith. I'm glad I didn't take Cowboys. But then there's a period in the second half where the Cows run in 3 straight tries. And I'm saying this off the top of my head, but anyway, the Cowboys were within a try, within 6 or 4 points, and were running over the Panthers and actually had a real opportunity to win before a late try, which I think Cleary had fingerprints on, kind of sealed it. And the final margin was 8 or 10 points, so right around the number. But it went down to the wire. The Cowboys showed, on a night like then, what they're capable of. It's just how unreliable have North Queensland been in other spots where you've really felt that the Cows have got to show up. They've been extremely disappointing. But then 2 weeks ago, last time the Cowboys played, went down to Canberra to play their 14th straight game, the only team in the comp that had not had a bye, with all these Origin players as well that had been through Origin 1, and smoked the Raiders and blitzed them down there. And I really feel like that may have revitalized the Cowboys season. And then the Cowboys finally got a bye. So if anybody needed one last week, it was North Queensland more than anybody. And does that mean that they can now come back out of that a bit fresh and showing what they're capable of? However, you have 6 players involved in game 2. Nana is not named at all. The other 5 you don't know. And then as for Penrith, well, what we do know, I should say generally, because I do recall a best bet where I was on Penrith against the Dragons, and then I still can't explain what happened in that second half. But generally, Penrith's a reliable bet at home. So you could go that direction and lay the points with Penrith. They're pretty strong, right? But are we sure all these Panthers players are backing up? They did after Origin 1. We know what the games Ivan likes to play, and he could scratch a whole bunch of them. So I actually think if you like North Queensland, you got to have some on the head-to-head before any news comes out. And if Penrith plays full strength, the 10.5 might be just as screwed as the head-to-head. Not just as, but you get what I'm saying, right? But if there's a bunch of players out, you can have a super juicy odds. So it's a higher variance game. And in addition to that, it's not just about who plays and who doesn't too. They do talk about how it's quite difficult physically and mentally to back up on that kind of 3 to 4 day turnaround, which is the Sunday game. So we've got potentially 9 or 10 players who could be in that scenario. And so it's really hard to judge how well they're going to play. Is it a potential flat spot for some of these guys, or are they bringing in the energy or the heartache, depending on which side of the ledger they fell from Wednesday night? So I also really struggled to get a read on this, because this year, which Cowboys team is turning up, I really have struggled to predict that.
I think as well, for me, a key consideration here is the Cowboys only play in Sydney 3 more times this year. This is one of those 3. The rest of them are mainly in Queensland or at home there in Townsville. So how does that affect the Cowboys? I don't know if they look at that as a positive. Hey, guys, we've got to start nailing them in Sydney, or does the trend continue where they just don't play their best footy in Sydney there? Look, I have to go Panthers here. In a game of uncertainty where I don't know who's going to be backing up, what's the one consistent thing I can lean on in this game? And it is the Panthers' home record, where they've won 14 of their last 16. We also know the Cowboys struggle in Sydney. That extends to this venue, where they haven't won since 2016. So an 8-year drought there. Now, let's say Jerome Luai backs up. I probably expect him to. He's won his last 5 in a row over the Cowboys. I expect him to back up and really relish the opportunity to go with some Queenslanders again. He seems like that sort of guy that, will be fired up after Origin and want to keep that momentum rolling. And Brian Toto, he's another one who I expect to back up. He's a tough winger that gets through a ton of work every single week. And he's also dominant here at his home ground. He scored a double last night in Origin. And at this venue, he scored 23 tries in his past 17 games. So I'm with the lineups uncertain, Winnie, I'm going to play it safe and lean on the stats. I'll go Panthers head-to-head and a Brian Toto try anytime. I think regardless of who's in the halves there, generally Toto gets good ball from Panthers halves.
You'd expect Yo, who played off the bench as well, to be good. Yeah. Martin was charged with 2 different counts, but it's worth saying he won't be suspended. He's just copped a fine out of that. And then Edwards as well, just because he did have to nurse that quad, though he got through the last club game for Penrith and obviously played just fine at the MCG. But you could understand. It's just, I do see the extremes because you would think, rest guys case by case. If they're a bit sore, play it conservatively. Because we talk about this Penrith side, they want to peak in September and nothing else really matters. But Ivan talks about, well, even if they're not physically worn out, mentally they need a break. So he has often withdrawn his stars in groups. And that's where it can be an all or nothing. So before that information comes out, you want to bet on the higher variance, the extremes.
Yeah, it's one of those ones. Either for me anyway, you either are intently watching the newspapers and media to see if you can get an advantage on who seems to be getting ruled out, or you just wait until an hour before when you've actually got the team list and make your decision then. I think it's one way or the other if you want to play this one, in my opinion. All righty, mate, let's get through our final game, 6:15 on Sunday, so we'll be here a bit later than usual. Allianz Stadium, Roosters host the Tigers. Line is set at -13.5 against the Roosters. Satili Tupanua moves to centre, and their Origin reps are named at this stage. For the Tigers, David Klemmer is back. And the Tigers have made it 2 in a row winning, but unfortunately neither of us for the Tigers have them winning 3 in a row. We're both with the Roosters in this one.
It feels that way to me. The Roosters will be the ones, I think, that get their 3rd win in a row. Am I saying that correctly? The Roosters, over Parramatta and then over the Bulldogs last week. And I said that kind of coming out of the bye after the Roosters got that shock loss before Origin 1, that Sunday arvo against the Cowboys B team. I do feel like a line was drawn in the sand. I do feel like there's a Roosters side that comes in equal 4th and with a better points differential than my Finns. But the Roosters look up and they see a Penrith, Cronulla and a Melbourne. They don't see anybody who's likely to slip, right? So there's not much room for error. If you want to be in the 4, it really could just be that 4th spot. The Roosters are also a couple of wins behind those sides. And it's not easy to make up ground, on the very top teams in the comp. They don't lose too often. So if you're the Roosters, I mean, you cannot waste opportunities when you're a double-digit favourite. It's that simple to me. And some people might be backing the Tigers because you've had success if you have done it the last 2 weeks. And I would say, geez, the Titans let the Tigers off the hook with the amount of opportunities missed and the amount of drop balls second half. And then the Raiders just fueled the fire by just not being able to complete sets first half, and which just gave the Tigers a momentum wave that they rode to a big lead, which even though there was a little fight back, it was never really in doubt. But like Raiders and Titans, no disrespect, but those teams on an off day, they would definitely say they would nowhere near their best, and you can vouch for that, is not the same as a Roosters team that is probably dialed in. So to me, the line is not enough. Now, I think there's a little bit of risk playing it. I acknowledge that because there's no Tigers reps from Origin, whereas the Roosters ideally would have Leniu, Collins, Crichton. Did I miss anyone? Oh, and Watson backing up. But it's like most of those guys did play off the bench. I honestly think the Roosters side have got enough depth that I'm not going to be too stressed if like 1 or 2 is withdrawn. I think it's too important of a game to rest everybody. It is by Sunday night, so there is the time. And I've got a Roosters side that's just like still too strong. I've got a Tigers side that's still very inexperienced. I do look at their reserves, and there's a couple of veterans on the bench, like John Bateman could return, right? But even if the Tigers name the best possible side from the 21, it's as simple as the fact that the Tigers are nowhere near the level of the Roosters, this year. The Roosters could win the comp this year. The Tigers would still be my pick for the wooden spoon.
Fire up, Winnie. It's time to hear the Clarkey's collect reasoning. We've been here for an hour and 10 minutes now, mate. Like a greyhound in box one with early speed. I've been waiting for this moment, and the gates have just opened. Let me tell you all why I'm with the Roosters, and get fired up here with me, guys. For what it's worth, the Tigers' last 2 win streak is more impressive than the Roosters. But when we go to long-term form, and who's the classier outfit on paper? It's no question. It is the Sydney Roosters here. Now, the Tigers this year, they're only averaging 18 points per game, and the Roosters are conceding that against a much higher variety of competition. You know what I mean? So I expect that average for the Tigers to drop to maybe 12 points. 18 points, I think they could hit their average max. I don't see them scoring more than that. Whereas the Roosters, they score an average of 11 more points per game than what the Tigers do. So that's 2 converted tries there. Now, the Roosters have won their last 7 games straight over the West Tigers. But, Winnie, if you want to draw that book back a little bit further, they've actually only lost 1 of their last 18 games against the Tigers. They have had the Tigers number for a long time now. The Tigers have not won 3 games in a row since 2018. It's a 6-year drought. Jared Warrior-Hargraves, he will equal the all-time Sydney Roosters games played for the club here. James Tedesco, it's his 150th NRL game as a Sydney Rooster, and who else would he rather play on this day than his former club? He will tear the Tigers to shreds. We're at Allianz Stadium. How have the Roosters performed at Allianz this year? They put 48 on the Bunnies, they put 60 on the Dragons, and they put 38 on the Warriors. I do think the Tigers fit into that competition there as a lower tier side, along with those other 3 so far this year. The last time the Roosters were in this spot, double-digit favourites where we just expect them to run right and smash a team, it was against the Raiders. They did exactly that. So my tip here is Roosters 13.5. And when I look at the Tigers, I'm talking from a betting perspective. I'm a Titans fan, of course, but it was concerning how often the left side of the Titans was just able to break them open. And what did the Raiders do last week as well? And the exact same thing. There's a tackle where Ethan Strange literally was on the ground, got up and scored there on the left edge. So I've got to add in Daniel Tupou. He's close to re-signing with the club. I think he scores. I think Roosters win 13 plus. And I hope that I was convincing there in my Clarkey's collect. What do you think, Winnie?
Well, the fact that we both come in independently too, we both like the Roosters. It does feel kind of simple, but again, like we're going against the Tigers side that's probably riding almost one of their highest points of the year and off a couple of upset wins, and they upset me the last couple of times. I'll give them a chance to upset me 3 weeks in a row. It'll also tie into the mixed matchup. Now, the way I've constructed this week's mixed matchup, I liked favourites, and ideally I need to pick a favourite. I need to pick a favourite I like against a favourite I don't like. As in, if I like an underdog in one game, a favourite in the other, I can mix and match there. But what I've done here, it's a little creative, and I'm not sure if people appreciate the value, but I think it is a good price. It is the Roosters' first half or second half total to exceed the Bulldogs' total. Okay, so the way I'm looking at this is the Bulldogs are predicted to score around 20 points on Friday night. My best bet is under 20.5. So let's say the Dogs do put up a flat 20 points. Then we've got $2.20 that, pardon me, that the Roosters, I'll try and spit it out, that the Roosters score more than 20 points in either half. Now, the Roosters are predicted to score like 33.5 points. So in each half, the Roosters over-under is about 15, 16 points. But you get 2 shots. And they are the type of team against the Tigers that I think could score in patches. We've seen that Tigers can harness momentum and could have, one strong half in this game potentially. But I think when the Roosters are on, they're a side that can just run them in quick fire. And realistically, basically what I'm telling you is I think we can get a half in this game. And it could be the Roosters out of the blocks, just giving the Tigers a bit of a lesson in, what a real high caliber footy team looks like. Or it could be the Tigers actually get to make it a bit gritty and have some of it their own way first half, and then more chance that the Roosters flex their muscles second half. But I'm basically looking for a half where the Roosters might score 4 tries, because I don't think the Dogs are necessarily going to get to 4 tries in the whole 80 minutes against dialed-in Cronulla side. That's my reasoning for my mixed matchup, which is paying $220 on Toppy. You can have up to 200 on, and our code is TP Live if you need a Toppy account.
Love it. If you do sign up for Top Sport and use that code, send me a DM on Instagram and let me know. That's your mixed matchup. Can we get a recap, please, of your best bets for anyone who might have joined us late?
So, yep, in the game tomorrow night, I have gone Bulldogs under 20.5 team total, $1.85 better and double. I've gone Storm to win the first half and the second half. So Storm to win both halves. I said 196 on better, and someone actually pointed out you can also get 198 on double. But again, not everyone does this, but if I tip something at a certain price and then we find out later there's a better price, I don't update the record for the better price. That's a win for you, but I accept that whatever I say, people might take that because I can't control where a price moves afterwards. So either way, win both halves and close to even money. And then the Roosters minus 12.5 at $1.91 on 365. Those are my 3 best bets.
Good stuff, mate. We absolutely love it. We are fast approaching that hour 20 mark, so we will call the show there, guys. From myself, thank you very much, everyone that was with us here tonight for this long edition, recapping Origin 2, giving our reaction there to everything, previewing NRL Round 17 and giving out our best bets as well. We appreciate your viewership. We never take it lightly. Don't forget, our next show will be our recap show, Winnie. That'll be within 15 minutes of full time on Sunday. And there is a later game this week, being a 6:15 kickoff for that Roosters-Tigers game. So we'll be with you a little bit later than usual, but we look forward to seeing you then. Over to you, Winnie, to farewell the show.
That's a triple header Sunday.
Yep.
We had Origin last night. I understand Queenslanders are licking their wounds, but don't worry, you got a home decider. Like, that's the other thing. Even as a Queenslander, I have to admit I'm not that deflated about last night because it's just so much better when it is a decider. It just makes it 10 times bigger. So I can't wait for Game 3. But Game 3 tonight too in the Women's Origin. I don't have a breakdown for you. I'm not going to pretend to know enough about it, but it's a close to a pick'em game. New South Wales is a slight favourite in Queensland, and that kicks off in just under an hour. So you do have time to have a look around and play whichever side, or obviously just to enjoy watching it. And then 7 games of NRL footy, as we said, with a later finish Sunday night, and we'll be back again. So it's been a big week for us, big week for footy fans. We love it. We wouldn't want to be anywhere else. So thank you to everyone who's tuned in. Let us know what you reckon about the bets, or if you've found any other great ones yourself. And have an outstanding week, guys. We'll talk to you Sunday.